This is we are going to do this. Actually, 2101.
Got the line thing this way.
We have technical problem in 2102, so we'll move it here. Okay.
Oh, room number. How's the control?
Hello. Okay, I think we're good to go.
All right.
I'm going to do it before the
We say it before.
you do the administrative.
Okay, do we have on Zoom? It's good.
13.
Oh, that's good. Library, you live in here.
Carrie showing up.
Okay, so we're ready. Okay, I think we're ready. We'll get started. It takes a little bit of time, some meetings to get all the technology worked out, but I think we have. So, in case anybody doesn't know me, my name is Joyce Lynch, and I am the president. We start out the meeting with asking for any new members or guests to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about why you're here. So we have new members or guests.
New member, Dr. Williams.
I'm also a new member. My name is Monique Riaga. Hi. Hi.
I'm Paul Harbert, live in Round Rock.
Yeah.
I'm guest actually visiting from Seattle. My name is Pradeep.
That's it. I'm also visiting from Seattle. My name is Cheetah.
Good to have you here. So, did you come for the eclipse or?
We happen to be here.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I think when it comes to the total eclipse in April, we're going to have a lot of people from a lot of places. Annular, yeah, it's nice, but we've been hearing there's not going to be the same level of interest as the total. Getting ready for that in 6 months. Okay, anybody else? Okay, well, let's see if we have any of our officers here. Not very many. Secretary's not here. The minutes are in the newsletter that came out today, and you can look those over with the last meeting and have any corrections and let the secretary know. Our treasurer is not here because he is in Corpus Christi to see the annual Christi to see the annual. But
Our secretary is here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just looking for who was in the room, and I don't have so.
If you're not speaking, what's wrong?
So anyway, that's all about it. Thank you.
Oh,
There is another echo going on.
Yeah, we hear it. We're trying
we have 3 people who are not on mute.
That's one of the problems. Feedback.
Now down to 1. Thank you, Shane and Larry. And thank you, Bob.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I thought we were getting feedback, but that.
The delay was too long. It was somebody's mic was picking up their speakers.
Oh, okay. All right. So we'll try it. Okay. So next report is our vice president who is recovering from surgery. So, but she's on Zoom. So Jamie, can we put her up there or not?
Yeah. Hey guys, am I causing a echo? You hearing it okay?
You sound great.
Okay, awesome. Hey there. So yeah, sorry, I was trying to get there this evening, just a week from my last hip replacement surgery. So very soon, next month, I'll be fully mobile, fully recovered. So thanks, Joyce, for covering for me and just for everything that you do. So I have, well, I got good news, and it was in the newsletter as well, about how we do have a venue for our Christmas gathering. Yay! But I'll just mention first, in fact, I just put it in chat, the names of folks that we have lined up. We've got Dr. Tiramalai in November, and I actually don't know specifically what his topic will be yet. We've been going back and forth for months trying to figure out, when he can get here. He's out in Houston. So we've settled on November, and he will be here, and he has done some work with NASA on astrobiology and extremophiles and such like that. So it'll be something along that line, no doubt. And then in January, we will have Bhavesh Parekh. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. He's coming from Oregon, so he will likely be via Zoom, although he just called me about half an hour ago, and he's in Houston on his way to San Antonio to see the eclipse. And he was asking me about places to go down there. Like, I don't know. And that's a different group. But anyway, he's going to talk to us about some new books that he has compiled that's basically built upon the NGC catalog, with a lot of new photos and reference info, and it's pretty impressive. So he'll talk about that in January. And then in December, we have our holiday party. And typically it's been on the same night as we normally would have had our meeting, which would have been the December the 8th. But we have a new venue. We're going to be meeting at St. Stephen's School, thanks to Frank Mikan, who's arranging to let us meet there. And that is going to have to be on December the 15th, however, Friday the 15th, because on the 8th, the school will still be in session, and, that'll be problematic. So we're going to be meeting December the 15th, and, we'll talk more about the details, of course, as we get closer to the time. And as I said, Joyce had put something about it in the newsletter as well. And we will do potluck. I didn't get anything specific back from Frank if he's wanting to contribute pizza. He's had our meetings there before in the past, and he likes to contribute pizza. So that sounds like fun too. And then he did say that we could even have a little bit of alcohol there, as long as we don't get out of control, you wild amateur astronomers. So that's a go. And then we're also just looking for good places to meet after meetings. But Joyce, you've come up with something else for tonight besides the Brutorium. So that sounds pretty good. I look forward to hearing how that works out. And that's pretty much it. I'm still in contact, or trying to be in touch with Laura up at UT. And I haven't heard anything back from her yet. It's been a couple weeks, but I know they're really busy with the fall semester and all of that. We do have the issue. What's that?
And the eclipse tomorrow. They're doing
yeah, that too. Yep. And we do also have the issue of that we haven't decided where we're going to meet in January. And we're up at ACC now because the parking is quite a bit better than during the semester at UT. But we have no plans for the spring semester, basically. So any suggestions, input, of course, I'm looking for that, or interested in that. So I think I covered everything.
Any questions for Jamie? Okay, thank you, Jamie. Keep that ice on there and get better.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, guys.
Okay. Terry, communications.
Okay, we are still engaged in a project to move our website from to a different host. It's currently with Midphase, and we want to move it to Amazon Web Services. And in addition to that, we want to get off of the software that we use. Our membership management is currently Wild Apricot, and we want to move that to another tool as well. First, we want to move the website, and then we'll change the management. Still, we're not making a lot of progress. Having trouble getting time with Jake, our webmaster, who is now residing in Fort Davis. I think I'm going to have to bring Sean in on this. We're going to make headway. We know we've got a goal to get the membership management tool moved before early December. We'll be paying another hefty yearly subscription to the management software folks, which we'd rather not do. We're moving to save money, basically. So that's what I'm working on. We're still plugging away.
Any questions for Jared? Okay, equipment, Greg isn't here. He's probably somewhere.
Colorado.
Oh yeah, sure, right there. That's right. The El Dorado Start Party is this weekend, and they quite sensibly scheduled it. It's about this time of year anyway, but they scheduled it for the weekend of the annular eclipse. So Greg's there, and I know some other people are there also. On November the 4th, we have a public start party scheduled for Pedernales Falls. There's some work that needs to be done on the observatory there. Some painting and some bookshelves need to be made. We're planning on a work day on November the 4th. We'll get out more information as we get closer to the date. Member services, we don't have a chair right now. We're looking for a chair. If anybody thinks they would be interested in that. The one thing I can report is that there was supposed to be a member start party tomorrow evening, but because there's so many people that are scattered all over for the eclipse, we have canceled that. The next one will be in 4 weeks. I think that's right, maybe 4 or 5 weeks. Anyway, the middle of November at Bad Wolf Ranch, and of course we get information about that. Outreach, it's not here. Let's see, we had a public start party at Pedernales Falls last Saturday. The sky started out as a little bit cloudy. It kind of cleared up a little bit, then got cloudy again. But we were participating in Pedernales Falls State Park's celebration of 100 years of state parks. So we wanted to be sure that we went out there, and there were we had about 130 people, I think, that came out, and there were some. We did some kids activities too. We did some, yeah. And there was the master naturalists that were there, and Don Davies was there with the Hill Country Alliance, and there were some other things that were going on. At one point, they were catching moths, and I think they were going to do something with bats. So it wasn't just astronomy, but some other activities that the state park did. So. As I said, as I've already said, and in the future, we have members public start party at Pedernales on the 4th, and then I think 2 weeks after that, we'll be at East Lake State Park. So again, these emails go, it's in the newsletter, emails go out, we'll be sure. Okay, any of the, I don't know if we have any members at large here. The newsletter came out this afternoon. And you know, Webmaster is not here and not on Zoom. Ernie Lee, is Ernie on Zoom?
Didn't see.
Okay. Ernie's our representative to Dark Sky International, which used to be the International Dark Sky Association. They've changed their name. I think I did see that he had an article in the newsletter today, so he wrote good about keeping this up to date on what's going on, putting articles in the newsletter. And Al Gordon's not here either, so that's it for a few officer reports. I don't have any business. Does anybody else have any business or any other questions or concerns? Okay, well, I guess we are ready then to move on to the program. And Mike Harada is a longtime member of the Austin Astronomical Society, and he is going to do our presentation this evening. So, Mike. Oh, I'm sorry, there's one other thing I should mention. I have, at one point a year or so ago, we had a large donation from a member, and the executive committee chose to use part of that to buy some eclipse glasses. Oh. And so we have 3,300 eclipse glasses. We just decided we want to give away. We're not going to try to sell them. I have some here. If there are any of you who would like to have some eclipse glasses for tomorrow and then save them for after the meeting, talk to me, and we'll get you some eclipse glasses. Okay, sorry, Mike, but that was good. Thank you.
Well, thanks for the introduction. Thank you all for being here tonight. The slides and my notes will be available in PDFs. I'd like to start off with an apology. The only reason that I'm up here tonight speaking to you is that most people would rather be in a room full of spiders than to be in front of an audience. Most of you know far more about astronomy than I do. So my specialty is history. And I do have many publications and some awards for writing about history, but I only owned a telescope for about 9 years. And for 2 of those, the telescope was back in its shipping carts while I served in the Texas military department. I didn't have time for astronomy. I just do not have that much observational experience. I have to apologize for taking the place of those who do. I just published a short article about the discovery of Messier 51 and the discovery of actually 2 discoveries of what we call Messier 51A and 51B. They served as models for attempting solutions to 2 very different problems in astronomy. The origin of solar systems and the cosmological context for the Milky Way. It was thought that perhaps solar systems formed in whirlpools like this. Then later, it was thought that perhaps our Milky Way galaxy would look something like this if seen from a great distance. Both of those theories were flatly denied, rejected by the leading astronomers of the 19th century. And we'll come back to all of this later. But I present it here and now as at the outset to frame our discussion for tonight, because these images and those theories are perfect examples of the kinds of errors and failures that led to our present understanding. And I also want to point out what this talk is not going to be about. It is not true that science never reaches the truth, but only approaches it. And it is not true that we gain knowledge by repeating the same experiment over and over again until we're more confident the outcomes might be right. Those are failures of modern philosophy. We suffered a false dichotomy in the 18th century when rationalism and empiricism were severed into 2 opposing camps, 2 opposing schools of thought. The scientific method is objective, which means that necessary factual truths are discovered and supported by both rational, synthetic, logical thinking, and also equally by empirical, evidentiary, sensory exploration and discovery. Theories explain facts, and facts have theory. There are a lot of good books about the history of astronomy. The problem is that when people read such works, they do not do so critically. These 2 otherwise fine books carry forward common errors in the reporting of history. The story of parallax by Alan Hirschfeld chronicles the repeated attempts over 2,000 years to measure the distance to the stars. We'll see later on that in the 200 years between Galileo and William Herschel, astronomers assumed that the stars were more or less randomly distributed and that their colors perhaps related to their temperatures by analogy to an iron bar being heated in a furnace. If one star was brighter than another, it was because that star was closer than the other. Unfortunately, while breaking new ground and thoroughly engaged in history of the problem of parallax, Hirschfeld never researched the easiest things of history. And he repeated several common errors about the Catholic Church and its relationship to astronomy. Nobel laureate Steven Weinberg knew science. Where he went astray in this book was in the history. The book is replete with small errors of fact. Like Hirschfeld, Weinberg had no direct experience with the Catholic Church, and he just repeated what other people think is true. Contrary to the title, Female Astronomers and Scientists Before Caroline Herschel, Caroline Herschel herself is among the 25 astronomers whose lives are outlined. Caroline Herschel and Mary Somerville were both inducted as honorary members of the Royal Astronomical Society in 1836. Somerville lived from 1780 to 1872. She's chronicled here that she was a younger contemporary rather than living before Herschel, who lived until 1848. These seem like small errors, but this is a short book of 179 pages, and it's replete with grammatical errors and stylistic inconsistencies, indicating a lack of editorial oversight by Springer Verlage's imprint praxis. I still rely on this, as I did and do on the others. But the author, Gabriella Bernardi, puts forward Christine Kirsch as the first woman to be a professional astronomer. Most writers claim that Caroline Herschel was the first woman to be paid to be an astronomer. Herschel was paid about 20 years after Christine Kirsch received an appointment in 1776. He was paid $400, like dollars, large silver coins, per year by the Berlin Academy of Prussia. So it's a good book, and one that's well worth reading, but it's important to compare and contrast your sources. I didn't find any problems with David Sobel's story of the Glass Universe. It's about the women who worked as computers at the Harvard Observatory. In fact, it's a pretty thorough roster, and I was able to follow several women from Harvard to other observatories thanks to David Sobel's outstanding scholarship. Most of you probably know her groundbreaking history, longitude. Yep. In the Middle Ages, using geometry, with the Earth at the center of the universe and everything moving in circles, astronomers pretty much have the distance to Saturn at about 1 billion miles, which is close to the actual value. But the stars are too far away to be measured with the instruments of those days. It was not until October of 1838 that Friedrich Bessel was able to measure the parallax of 61 Cygni. It's a fascinating story, but in explaining Copernicus's context in the Renaissance society of 1500, Hirschfeld wrote, scholars communicated with one another freely, exchanging ideas that centuries earlier might have brought them to the state. In fact, no one was executed for astronomy. The problem of Easter required reconciling the solar and lunar calendars. Using astrolabes and water clocks, medieval astronomers knew that the geocentric model of Ptolemy required corrections. They suggested astronomical models to explain why, and no one was considered a heretic for doing so. Hirschfeld also repeatedly blamed Aristotle for an inventory of untruths that were not his fault. What were essentially Aristotle's lecture notes had been transcribed and collated by his student, Theophrastus. Then, the Macedonian royal family squabbled over the library. There was a treasure trove to them. The books were stashed by being buried. And buried, they were eaten through by worms. Then, second-rate scholars reconstructed the worm-eaten scrolls. All that aside, generally, Aristotle worked on gathering what was known or claimed by the savants before him. He then gave his opinion based on his assessment of the facts that he knew. He was a cataloger. Aristotle's strongest writings were in biology because he worked firsthand as an observer. His embryology of the chick remains an unassailed classic. But you can hold a hen, an egg, and a chick in your hand. Comments are intractable. Everyone is guessing. Steven Weinberg made the same sorts of errors in his narrative. He knew science. His failing was in accepting secondhand histories. I was shocked at the obvious errors, and so was the New York Times. His major premise remains true and insightful. Weinberg demonstrated clearly that as objective truth, science is discovered, not invented, and it will and must be the same for every sentient being everywhere in the universe. But it was not practiced in ancient Greece, the Islamic Middle East, China, or medieval Europe. The essence of modern science is the controlled and therefore unnatural experiment. I have very many post-it notes. In Stephen J. Dick's Discovery and Classification in Astronomy, Controversy and Consensus. I rely on it often when I write about the history of astronomy. The main narrative of 340 pages delivers a chronology by types, from planets to quasars, and then reviews the works and publications to reveal the patterns. That includes the drivers of discovery, and the process can take centuries. Finally, the story of how the Hobby-Eberly telescope was built is fascinating in its own. But I like it also because it's a reminder that history is being made and recorded here and now, which is why I take our sidereal times seriously. And speaking of egregious errors, did anybody read sidereal times for this month? Yet? Well, sort of.
I glanced at it.
I have an egregious error in my article about the Astronomical League. It was not the Drapers who made the first photographic images of Messier 51 AD. They did the Orion Nebula. 51 AD was done by Isaac Roberts. Cut and pasted one paragraph.
You can tell Nathan and he can change it. So if you want.
As long as I'm writing other people's editors. Okay. Agnes Mary Clark was easily the most respected historian of astronomy in the 19th century. An active correspondent with observatories and with both academic and amateur astronomers of her time, Clark was known for her articles about the latest discoveries in astronomy. She was so prolific an author that her primary biographers, Margaret Lindsay Leahy Huggins, herself an astronomer of merit in the 20th century, and astrophysicist Mary Teresa Rick in the 21st, simply stated that Mary Agnes Clark's publications were innumerable. The Edinburgh Review published 55 of the rest of it. Nature, 27. The Observatory, 42. For the Encyclopedia Britannica, 9th edition, Clark completed the biographies of Galileo, von Humboldt, Lavoisier, Huygens, Kepler, Lagrange, and Laplace, among others, as well as for the Catholic Encyclopedia. Clark wrote the entries on astronomy and astronomy in the Bible. She advanced the front ranks of popularizers with the appearance in 1885 of Histories of Astronomy in the 19th century. That work went through 3 more editions in 1887, 1893, and 1902. Meanwhile, she also wrote System of the Stars in 1890, The Herschel in 1891, Problems in Astrophysics in 1903, and finally Modern Cosmogonies published in 1905. Clark was recognized for her work at the Cape of Good Hope Observatory in South Africa. She was the first person to record the spectrum of Eta Carinae. As popular as she was with the general public, professional astronomers also lauded her books. In order to secure her facts, she began correspondences with Edward Holden, David Gill, and George Ellery Hale, among others. And those continued throughout her life. So her books received positive reviews from the observatory, publications of the Astronomical Society of the Pacific, Sidereal Messenger, Bulletin Astronomique, and Science. Only Nature stood apart. Initially supportive because she was one of their own contributors, the editors of Nature became partisans of J. Norman Lockyer and his theory that stars are born from massive aggregations of meteoric material. Lockyer founded Nature, and he was the co-discoverer of helium. Clark found better contrary evidence in the spectroscopic calibrations carried out by William and Margaret Huggins. Lockyer himself had encouraged Clark early on, and they remained friends. Nevertheless, Nature denigrated her books, damning them with faint praise. And that finally changed only in 1903 to Problems in Astrophysics when they launched a tirade against her. She dedicated that work to her mentor, critic and friend, Sir David Gill. Gill began his career as an amateur and was eventually appointed Her Majesty's astronomer and director of the Royal Observatory at the Cape of Good Hope, South Africa. Clark lodged with the Gills for 2 months through September and October 1888, and she completed several projects in observation and spectroscopy. As I said, she was the first to record the spectrum of Eta Carinae. Now, the point is relevant because although the community of professional astronomers with whom Clark corresponded for over 20 years as a historian, news reporter, welcomed problems in astrophysics, Nature was left sanguine. In the middle of a 3,000-word review, which presented truly a litany of technical problems, editor Richard A. Gregory included a barb that was wholly out of place. He wrote, the quote, "A cynic has said that it is a characteristic of women to make rash assertions, but in the absence of contradiction to accept them as truth. Miss Clark is apparently not free from this weakness of her stance."
Boo, boo, boo.
That failing was limited as half the population, our common problem to be greatly reduced. And the mathematician should suggest to the cynic that providing just one male with that characteristic would satisfy this proof by counterexample. Be that as it may, the subject of Gregory's review was a litany of errors involving spectroscopy and interpretation of spectroscopic data. Clark, of course, was citing from peer-reviewed journals, and Gregory also ignored Clark's work while she was in Cape Town. So perhaps the best context to all of it is to accept the sociological perspective that whatever the empirical facts and rationalist theories, science is also about people, our personalities, and our interactions. Richard Gregory was engaged in a long conflict against Mary and William Huggins over Norman Lockyer's theory that stellar energy originates with the accretion of meteoric material from deep space. Clark also rejected that theory And she remained a close friend of both the Hugginses, and she got along well with Norman Lockyer, at least at public dinners when they sat together. Clark remains important for modern readers. First, in the late 19th century, she was an eminent historian and a popular reporter of the astronomy of her time. She was literate in German, French, and Italian, and her summaries were always supported by references to original, peer-reviewed publications. But beyond that, her erudition included studies that we have long since lost. Her familiar studies in Homer, published in 1892, included a chapter on astronomy in the Iliad and the Odyssey. Before the classical era, in the time of Homer, from about 800 BCE to about 500 BCE, the Greeks did not even perceive the planets as apart from other stars. The Sleepwalkers is a history of early astronomy. The theme and thesis is that brilliant thinkers before Newton came really close to understanding everything that we accept today, but they stumbled past the ultimate truth. Galileo Galilei was the first to observe Saturn with a telescope in 1610. It was not just because of the crudeness of his telescope that he could not determine what the rings were. It was a failure of epistemology. No one knew that planets have rings, so he had no way to understand what he was looking at. Galileo incorrectly guessed that these were two large moons on either side of Saturn. And 2 years later, when he viewed Saturn again, the moons had disappeared. And we know that this is because Galileo was viewing the rings edge on, so they were invisible. At the time, it was very confusing to him. Because in another 2 years, Galileo viewed Saturn again, and he found that the moon had returned. He concluded that the rings were arms of some sort. Of course, he did not invent the telescope, and others of his time, including Simon Marius, Johannes Kepler, Christopher Clavius, had been credited with similar discoveries. And throughout the 17th century, astronomy was extended and expanded with bigger and better telescopes. Even after Newton's reflector telescope and Newton's Principia Mathematica, advances came surely, but slowly, over decades and lifetimes. In the late 1700s and early 1800s, fantastic and huge telescopes opened immense vistas and deep views. Observational astronomy was the family business in the household of William Herschel. Caroline Herschel recorded her first original discovery of a comet on August 1st, 1786, and 7 more comet discoveries followed. Over the years, she also reported on her observations of the nebulae, and over a dozen of those are credited to her. Among other pursuits, she identified 560 stars that had been recorded by Astronomer Royal John Flamsteed between 1689 and 1719, but without proper data. In 1828, in recognition of her achievements, the Royal Astronomical Society honored her with a gold medal. In 1835, she was inducted as an honorary member of the Royal Astronomical Society. In the house of William Parsons, the 3rd Earl of Rothsey, Mary Field Rothsey was engaged in iron castings for the castle keep as one of several hands-on tasks, as her husband invested himself and her inheritance in his Leviathan telescope, which she also likely worked hands-on. It's quite possible that she designed and supervised the brickwork. Yes. She was also acknowledged by other inventors as a pioneer in the practice of photography in the 1850s. Now, the drawing of Messier 51, Messier 51A and B, the one at top left, it was published by William Rossi based on his observations, his own and his assistant's observations. The drawing at the bottom left is the work of Howard Bandage, one of our contemporaries. It's from the Sky and Telescope article just a few years ago. The photograph at right was the work of Isaac Roberts, who took the first ever of Messier 51 in 1889. He continued his work, and that picture is from 1898. A little color photograph at the center is a typical amateur effort from our time by a friend of mine of Cloudy Nights, Stephen Miller. The problem is that all of the stunning views and pretty pictures did not reveal the true nature of this pair of galaxies. For 2 generations in the 1800s and into the 20th century, these spiral galaxies were offered as evidence in support of 2 different problems: the origin of the solar system and the cosmological context for the Milky Way. In the late 1700s and into the early 1800s, Herschel was not alone in believing that better telescopes would eventually resolve every nebula into a cluster. No one had a proper theoretical understanding of dust and gas. The William Herschel family also labored to record double stars in pursuit of the problem of parallax. As I said earlier, in the 200 years between Galileo and William Herschel, astronomers assumed that the stars were more or less randomly distributed. So if one star was closer than the other, it was because that star was closer to us. The brighter than the other was closer to us. And the closer was a candidate for measurement by parallax, and that never proved possible. Stars were just too far away to be dealt with by simple geometry. Eventually, William Herschel published his declaration in 1820 that many binary stars are gravitationally bound. They are proper pairs about the same distance from us. And moreover, clusters are not visual accidents. The problem of stellar clusters, starry nebulae, is related to the problem of Saturn's rings and to the problem of solar system formation. These separate phenomena were addressed first by Pierre-Simon Laplace, and then by James Clerk Maxwell in the 19th century. Maxwell solved the problem in 1859 in a competition for a cash prize, the Adams Prize. He was the only one to enter a paper. The question was to explain the rings of Saturn. If you know anything about James Clerk Maxwell, you probably know his equations for electrodynamics. In fact, those only came to the front of our attention after his death. In his time, he was best known for the mathematics of molecular motion. This form of Maxwell's equations was actually presented by Oliver Heaviside, who also explained why radio waves are reflected off the ionosphere, the barrier we call the Heaviside layer. What is perhaps most important in all of this is the long years, the decades, the generations, and the lifetimes between Galileo and Maxwell. It takes time for people to absorb, understand, integrate, and then deeply question the knowledge that we inherit. And there's more to this than the telescope. The spectroscope has a long history of invention and development, and it's very insightful application in astronomy. Amateurs do this today. It's a hobby, just like an observational astronomy. And we had Tom Field of Field Tested Systems as a guest speaker here back in January of 2021. Radio astronomy was invented to solve a problem with noise in radio communication. We all spend more time arguing about the best 6mm eyepiece while we ignore 99% of the magnetic spectrum. The development of the spectroscope and of radio led to a new understanding of the structure of the universe, integrating chemistry and physics and generating even deeper questions. Many of us still maintain this picture for the structure of an atom. And it's okay. It works for many common problems to explain water and table salt and how to track little pieces of paper by rubbing a comb through your hair. Those of us still have it. But there's a better way to understand the atom and electron orbital. When I worked at the Hands-On Museum in Ann Arbor, we had one of these collaging plates. And I thought I was being really clever and insightful when I used it to explain the kitchen fireworks I was demonstrating by heating metal salts to produce green, yellow, orange, and red flames. In fact, according to Wikipedia, in quantum mechanics, these Chladni figures, these nodal patterns, were long known to be related to the solution of the Schrödinger equation for electron orbitals. It provides a deeper explanation for the pretty colors that amateur astronomers like to extract for the Ring Nebula and the Ghost Nebula and the Rosette Nebula. We have these tools as backyard amateurs, but they took the best minds in physics long decades to discover, develop, and understand so that we could absorb and reflect their subtle energy. What's on the event horizon? I mean, the stars are pretty at any magnification. What gives them meaning is understanding what they are. I'm 74 years old. When I grew up, electrons were little balls with a minus sign. Those of you who are 45 or 55 may not realize that you too have a cultural context that provided your paradigm. The times they are changing. I'm sorry that I can't provide an attribution for this quote. It was an offhand comment during the 2021 conference in dynamical astronomy sponsored by the American Astronomical Society. Today, data is everything, and everything is data. Those pretty pictures from the James Webb Space Telescope are for public consumption. There are skillful amateurs taking pictures that reveal new truths, but professionals live in a different universe. I'm not going to present or argue these points. They were debated by the researchers themselves at the conference, and it left me behind. Even in what I understood, I was not professionally invested. But I got the big picture. For the present generation, astronomy is about data, not telescope. And I just read an article about a new telescope being built, huge multi-meter array of multiple mirrors that will be set up in Chile. So we still do observational work, but it's not the cutting edge. Okay? It's not where the future is being made. Exoplanets. They're a rich area. And they're crowded with investigators, including amateurs. We can see these things. They seek to find patterns in fourth order data reduction. The answer is to track more questions. If you love data reduction, and there are opportunities for amateurs to join professionals in their work. There's more data out there than anybody can analyze, and they're desperate for people who want to come in, be trained, and learn how to analyze the data and help the professionals present understandings that may lead forward. There are always surprises for everyone to appreciate. Apparently, interstellar space is not empty at all. Apparently, it's crowded with objects that were not detected in the 20th century. Continuing the search for large trans-Neptunian planets is another pro-am collaboration. We have good reason to believe that there's one more large planet out there. We just haven't found it yet. Oh. Planet 9 is awaiting discovery. But along the way, astronomers are discovering very many brown dwarf stars near our own solar system that look something like this. This is a magnified image that presents the volume between us and Proxima Centauri, and then out perhaps to maybe 20 light years. It's all very close. But who knew? Coming to the end of my presentation tonight, allow me to suggest that if you want to work on a pro-am project, there are very many of them out there, starting with the AAVSO, the American Association of Variable Star Observers, which was founded over 100 years ago at Harvard. Just because even back then, there was more data, more work to be done than professionals could do. And there are many others. Like most of us here tonight, I prefer to be alone in the dark. But being in the dark doesn't mean being ignorant. I like to know what I'm looking at. Remember that when you get out there with your 100mm refractor or your 22-inch Dobsonian, you're walking in the footsteps of giants of 200 years ago. You have the opportunity to know more than they did. The American Astronomical Society is making a concerted effort to bring amateurs into astronomy in collaboration with professionals. They bought Sky and Telescope magazine, rescued it. They also bought Wilman Bell Publishers and rescued that. All AAS publications are open source. Anyone can read the journal articles without a subscription. The AAS specialty groups have their own publications. They hold their own conferences. I'm in the historical astronomy division. I edit a monthly column this month in astronomical history. My job is to find people to write for me. If anybody wants to do 750 to 1250 words on a topic in astronomy, please send it in. If I can't do that, I have to write it myself. It's the October article. Last year I did 4 of them, which is more work than I care to do. When it started out, the person who had the column wrote it for over 2 years, and then she reached out to others in the field, so they would do the writing. Then my guess is about, it was 2023, so about 2018. I've also been in the dynamical astronomy division. If you have a Coronado or a Lunt telescope, then maybe the physics, solar physics division could be for you. The AAS is not the only organization open to amateurs. The British Astronomical Association also touts its pro-am collaborations, even though the Society for Popular Astronomy was founded by Sir Patrick Moore, among others, in reaction to the exclusionary attitudes of the BAA. We all know Sky and Telescope magazine and Astronomy magazine, but amateur astronomy was created specifically for us. The Society for Astronomical Sciences is dedicated to astronomy with a small telescope, by which they mean smaller than the ones on Mount Palomar. There's a lot of 18 and 22-inch Dobsonians out there doing work. These conferences cost money to attend. They're a little pricey, but they do publish proceedings. So if you pay for the conference, you get the proceedings. And they do work their place as well against the professionals in discoveries and investigation, because there's more work to be done than any one small group can do. We outnumber professionals greatly. And there are many times when professional astronomers who schedule their time years in advance find themselves clouded over. Not so much in Chile, but in other places. And they turn to us for the opportunity to catch something that they simply cannot observe and record. The Astronomical Society of the Pacific was inclusive and diversity-oriented 100 years before those words were invented. They are, after all, on the West Coast. And as a member, I paid to attend their online conferences. They extended and expanded my understanding of what I see through the telescope. The most recent one presented an integration between the stellar processes and the periodic table of elements. It was written and produced for high school teachers. So I had a good time watching it and learned quite a lot. If you go back through sidereal times, you can find links to other societies and online discussion boards. If you do not have a UT library card, you're doing yourself a disservice. And if you do not have a City of Austin library card, you're cheating yourself because you already paid for it. And you pay for it with your property taxes if your property on there. And if you're a renter, you're paying your landlord's property tax. And if you have a child in school anywhere in Travis County, you can get a City of Austin library card. I'll close by saying that history is not something that happened to other people. It's being made here and now. You participate in it when you engage in the hobby of astronomy. And that means more than nailing 100 Messier objects in 10 hours. You have to understand what you're looking at and why it's important and relevant to you. And those questions, those answers, are different for each of us.
Questions? I'll mention that you're talking about the American Astronomical Society, and a couple of weeks ago, there were 13 people from AAS who attended a workshop, a free workshop that they did in San Antonio, and they even fed us lunch, and they're going to reimburse mileage about outreach for the eclipse. And one of the speakers was from the Night Sky Network, which is within the Astronomy Society of the Pacific. So I can confirm what you're saying, that they're interested in amateurs, not just professionals. Any questions for Mike?
I don't have a question. This is Bill Spizzeri. I don't have a question, but I have to say, I thought I knew this topic, but first of all, it's a very interesting topic, and you did a very good job of it. You covered many more details of it than I wouldn't have imagined. Thank you very much.
Do you have something, E.L.?
Yeah, can you maybe repeat why you think that telescopes are no longer the main topic, or maybe I misunderstood this?
Well, they're not the cutting edge of astronomy anymore. We're not looking to build ever bigger, although yeah, they are building yet another bigger telescope. There's a limit to that. The way I would look at it is that from another point of view, there's a discussion about what's called creative destruction, that as markets move forward, old forms are left behind and new forms are brought forward. Okay? But that is, I think, is incorrect. And one of the writers I like, Jane Jacobs, who was involved in sociology in the 60s, pointed out that old forms seldom go away. And she offered several examples. One was that in the 18th century, companies, men who made brass horse fittings for horse tack went into the business of making brass fittings for machinery. And on a similar note, economist George Selgin wrote about what he called the Birmingham button makers. In Birmingham, England, the factories that had been turning out buttons began turning out coins. The British Royal Mint had fallen behind in their production and in their technology. And the economy had moved forward to the point where bread and beer were only cost pennies, but there were no 1 penny coins. It wasn't profitable to strike copper. So what they did, they made copper tokens. And these were locally produced. They celebrate local themes like Got Four, which Rise of Youth is in their genre. It was just, local stuff.
That was still in effect when I was a kid. The local co-op would give you plastic discs, which you could use as money rather than actual coins.
Exactly.
So it's sort of like a silver certificate?
Very much so. The point being that they had been making buttons, and when the opportunity came, they began making coins. Because those who made brass fittings for horseback, in terms of making brass fittings that went into machineries, including wristwatches and so forth in the 18th century. So the telescope isn't going to go away. We're not going to stop making it. We're not going to stop using it. And I confess, I don't do radio astronomy. I don't do astrophotography. And I don't do spectroscopy. I'd like to. I mean, I like to do a lot of things. 24 hours in a day. But those are the leading edge. And for young astronomers today, who buy telescopes that do not even have eyepieces, okay? Everything is tied to the computer. It's all data.
I like to tell the story of being at a star party, and there were some people from UT astronomy department who were there trying to set up a telescope, and they were having a lot of trouble. And one of them said, "We're astronomers. We don't know anything about telescopes," which, you know, to some extent is true, because so much of astronomy is done, as Mike said, without telescopes. It's data that is collected at a telescope, but sent to the astronomers somewhere else.
Yeah, but I think that's a little bit misleading, right? People, astronomers, sit on computers, but they get their data from telescopes far away. So in that sense, they are working tough with data, but the telescopes themselves are still key instruments, and maybe right. You look at the near infrared, you look at radio telescope, or now gravitational waves, and currently they only can have 2 spots to detect something, but they probably in the future build telescope or imaging devices so that you actually can localize something in the sky. So maybe it's a little bit misleading to say that you need spatially resolved imaging devices, right? Whether it's an array of microwave dishes or something that gives you an image of the sky.
For new information and extend your senses with this quick. The power of James Webb is in the infrared sense.
Yes, yeah. So outside the telescope, it's still a telescope. Yeah, it's still a telescope, right? It's just in.
But it's not visible light.
It's not visible light. So if you say visible light, okay, that might. Yes. So it's a near infrared, far infrared.
And honestly, some of what's coming from the James Webb has been turned into something that the public can see, because we need to support NASA and James Webb and all that. And that's not really for the benefit of the scientists so much as it is for the public that's funding it.
Pretty pictures.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
We lost the sound from the speaker.
Around the world, image SDA 51A and B over 20 some hours, over a dozen days and nights, and then combine their images. And in so doing, they reveal patterns in the dust between those 2 galaxies that had not previously been known. The arc. Yes. Right. So it's not the end of people still have horses.
I'm just going to maybe reflect on what you said and kind of distill it down and see if it sounds like maybe my own interpretation is in line with what you say. The way I distill it down is maybe you're saying that there's like a dearth of data. I mean, no, there's a plethora of data, but maybe a dearth of the quality of the way it's being analyzed. So it's like there's more focus on the analysis. We've got plenty of data. That's kind of the way that what it sounded like you were saying to me. We have lots and lots of data. We need to concentrate on the quality of analysis, improving and expanding on the way we analyze the data.
the conference I attended, you're right. They argued back and forth over the same data, using different interpretations. Again, fourth order statistics. And so forth.
But yeah, I guess I would, to kind of summarize, I mean, the big picture is you have to have data to analyze. The analysis is worthless.
Again, American Association of Variable Star Observers, AAVSO, and also IOTA, the International Occultation Timing Association, IOTA, another one that accepts and trains amateurs for professional level work. And for that matter, observing the sun, which is something that you can do with a simple projection using an ordinary telescope and just project the image onto a white screen. Don't damage your eyes. And then draw out the sunspots. And you make a circle of appropriate size and draw out the sunspots on it and record the latitude and longitude and report that up the chain to the solar observatory. So there's a lot of work out there to be done. And I happened to sit in a talk delivered by Clyde Tombaugh. And he spent a lot of time observing the moon. Now, when you're old, you got a lot of time on your hands and you can stare at the moon for long. Kids don't do that. They look at something for 30 minutes. But if you look at something for 30 minutes, Tombaugh said that he had seen meteoric impacts on the moon. Just because he's been out there night after night after night, watching and watching and watching. So there's still stuff to be done in the old-fashioned way, and it can be rewarding, and it's for you, and whether anybody else benefits from it or not. It's a hobby, and there's a lot of hobbies in the world. This is ours. Astronomy is not in the top 30 hobbies. Running, walking, and jogging each individually placed above astronomy for the number of people doing it. The last estimate I heard, the international market for amateur astronomy is about $250 to $280 million annually. Sounds like a lot of money, but if you divide that by the number of people involved, you're talking about one new telescope a year. And again, that would pale in comparison to things like running, walking, jogging, reading books, watching TV, crafting, scrapbooking. These are things that people do. Bird watching in particular. I like to compare what we do with bird watching. And ornithologists, bird watchers actually get more involved in birds than we do, because we never go up to feed the stars. It's a hobby, and it's for you. And whatever you want to do with your hobby is for your own.
Getting back to your discussions on data, I hadn't heard much about astronomers, professional astronomers, and data scientists in that area using artificial intelligence. Is that going on? I just haven't heard of it. Whole process.
Yeah, there's a lot. I keep up with papers, and I post stuff on the Discord every day. I have a couple of days about it. They go nuts.
Yeah.
And you're even have for everything.
The problem with the star, I mean, you have so many stars. Sky surveys, right? They produce an enormous amount of data. There's no person that could look through all this data to find interesting objects. So you have to train computers to actually find objects, and then you can later, for instance, confirm that actually better than the other parties. Or classification, just look at how many objects are out here.
With the advancement of technology, has astronomy moved towards more empirical, database, telescope-based kind of study from like theoretical? Or is it something happening on the theoretical side as well, where people are just still trying to imagine things that make it?
I don't know the answer to that, but the question is astronomy moving away from the empirical,
moving
towards empirical and gathering of data versus the rational explanation of theory? Typically, in science, astronomy, physics, that sort of stuff, brings into the chain order of the theoreticians. They're both well along. Typically, you go to archive on our one, there's 4,000 to 10,000 papers per week. Probably 200 different things. And they have a strong news. Somebody's got their cell phone, could look up the last Stargazers.
The book?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, we did that.
I'll look it up real quick.
Emily,
yes, Emily Levesque. Well, let us French. Yes. Well, Emily Levesque. The book is called The Last Stargazer, and she writes about her experience as a graduate student up to being a postdoctoral researcher in astronomy. And to underscore what Joyce said, she admits she grew up with a telescope because her father had one and took the kids out to look at stars with their Celestron or I guess they want to Meade LX200 Classic, right? So she did that, but she said that many of her peers have no idea what's up there. So there's that. The other thing is she also tells the secondhand story of the time that someone took some shots at the Howard Davis telescope.
Yeah, I think I've heard that.
Yeah, there's one of the mirrors out there that they had to redo because someone got annoyed because it was cloudy and pulled out 45 and shot the mirror.
So heck, I was mad people have been killed in observatories. The big doors open and close if you're not watching where you're going. You see what's going on around you, you can kill it. All this is in Emily Levesque's book, The Last Stargazer. So it's well worth reading.
Okay. Anyone else? All right, well, let's thank Mike once again for the talk.
Okay. After our meeting, we usually go somewhere and have food and drink. We've been going to the Brutorium, which is that way, I guess. Figure out where I am in the building. That way. There's another possibility, and that is there's a Pluckers over in the lake. Anybody that wants to go, you want to express a preference. Anybody want to go? I'm sorry? They're both about the same, really. Oh. Yeah. You've been to the Brutorium. Did you have to walk over there last time? No. I just thought, since you were talking about what